The world was no longer what it once was. What began in a perfect garden had now become something unrecognizable. Violence spread across the world, corruption filled the hearts of humanity, and the image of God within mankind had become buried beneath sin and darkness. The beauty of creation still remained, but something deeper had been lost. And as generations passed, the weight of that brokenness only grew heavier. But in the midst of a world that had turned away from God, one man remained different. One man walked a different path, and through him, the future of humanity would be preserved, a world consumed by corruption. As time moved forward, humanity multiplied across the earth, but instead of growing in righteousness, the human heart drifted further from God. Genesis tells us that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Violence was no longer rare. It had become normal. People lived for themselves, driven by desire, power, and selfish ambition, with little regard for God or for one another. The world, once declared good, had become filled with chaos. Relationships were broken, justice was absent, and the moral fabric of humanity had unraveled. What began with a single act of disobedience in Eden had now spread across the entire world, touching every corner of human life. And God saw it all. Nothing was hidden. Nothing escaped his sight. God's grief and decision. Genesis describes something deeply powerful about God in this moment. It says that the Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. This is not the language of anger alone, it is the language of grief. The Creator looked upon his creation and saw what it had become. The world that was designed for life, relationship, and goodness had become overwhelmed by sin. And so, God made a decision, not out of cruelty, but out of justice. He would bring an end to the corruption that had spread across the earth. He would cleanse the world, wiping away the violence and wickedness that had taken hold of humanity. But even in this moment of judgment, God did not abandon his plan completely, because there was still one man who walked with him. Noah finds favor. In the middle of a corrupt and broken world, Noah stood apart. Genesis describes him as a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and someone who walked faithfully with God. While others followed their own desires, Noah chose obedience. While the world ignored God, Noah listened. And because of this, Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. God spoke to Noah and revealed what was coming. The earth would be destroyed by a great flood, waters covering everything, bringing an end to the world as it was known. But Noah and his family would be spared. God gave Noah a command: build an ark, not a small boat, but a massive structure designed to carry life through the coming judgment. And without fully understanding how or when this would happen, Noah obeyed. The ark explained. God did not give Noah a simple task. He gave him something that would take time, effort, and unwavering faith. The instructions were precise, detailed down to the measurements, the materials, and the structure itself. This would not be a small vessel, not something hidden or easily dismissed. It would be massive, towering above the earth, a structure unlike anything the world had ever seen. Built from wood, sealed carefully to withstand what was coming, it would stand as both a warning and a promise. And so Noah began. Day after day he worked, cutting wood, shaping beams, raising the frame piece by piece under the open sky. The sound of tools echoed across the land as the ark slowly took form. What began as scattered materials slowly grew into something undeniable, something visible, something impossible to ignore. And the world around him watched. People passed by. They saw the structure rising higher and higher, saw the effort, the dedication, the persistence. And they questioned it, mocked it, dismissed it. Because nothing like this had ever been needed before. No one had seen what Noah had seen. No one believed what Noah believed. But Noah did not stop. He continued building, not for days, not for weeks, but for years. Through heat, through exhaustion, through doubt that may have crept in quietly at times. Because obedience is not always easy. Faith is not always comfortable. And yet Noah stayed faithful to the command he had been given. As the ark grew, it became more than just a structure. It became a dividing line between belief and disbelief, between those who ignored God and the one man who listened. Inside, space was prepared. Rooms were formed, places for animals, for food, for survival. Every detail mattered, every part had a purpose. Because this ark was not just being built for Noah, it was being built to carry life through judgment. And still, the world carried on as if nothing was coming, until the day when everything would change. The flood begins. And then, the day came. There was no warning from the sky, no sudden announcement that the moment had arrived. At first, it may have seemed like any other day. The world moved as it always had. People went about their lives, unaware that everything was about to change. The ark stood completed, towering over the land as it had for so long, a silent witness to what was coming. Then, the sky began to shift. Clouds gathered, dark and heavy, stretching across the horizon in a way no one had seen before. The air grew thick, still, almost as if the world itself was holding its breath. And then, the first drop of rain fell. One drop, then another. And then the sky opened. Rain poured down with a force that had never been seen, relentless and unending. It was no passing storm. It did not slow. It did not break. It continued hour after hour, day after day, without pause. But it was not only the rain. Genesis tells us that the fountains of the deep burst open. Water did not just fall from above, it surged from beneath the earth itself. The ground split, and from it came rushing water, rising, spreading, consuming everything in its path. And still, the rain did not stop. The ark stood firm. Inside, Noah, his family, and every living creature waited. The sounds outside were unlike anything they had ever heard. The roar of water, the force of the storm, the collapse of the world they once knew. There were no windows to see what was happening beyond, only the movement beneath them as the waters began to lift the ark from the ground. For the first time, it floated. The earth disappeared. Fields were swallowed. Trees vanished beneath the rising waters. The highest places, the strongest structures, everything that once stood firm was overtaken. What had been a world full of life was now becoming an endless expanse of water. Days passed, and the rain continued. 40 days and 40 nights without stopping. There was no escape outside the ark. No place to run, no ground left to stand on. Everything outside was lost. And inside the ark, surrounded by darkness and the constant sound of the storm, Noah and his family could do nothing but trust. Trust that the God who had warned them would also carry them through. And as the waters covered the earth, the world as it once was came to an end. Waiting in the silence. And then, the rain stopped. After 40 days and 40 nights of unrelenting storm, the sound that had filled the ark for so long began to fade. The pounding rain softened, slowed, and finally gave way to silence. But it was not a comforting silence. It was something deeper, something heavier. Because outside the ark, there was nothing left. No voices, no movement, no life, only water. Endless water stretching in every direction. Inside the ark, time seemed to lose its meaning. Days passed, but there was no clear sense of progress, no way to measure how much longer this would last. The world they had known was gone, and what lay ahead was uncertain. The ark drifted, lifted by waters that covered even the highest mountains. It moved without direction, carried by a force far beyond human control. There were no landmarks, no horizon to guide them, just the gentle, constant motion of the water beneath them. And inside, life continued. Noah and his family woke each day to the same reality, the same enclosed space, the same sounds, the same waiting. They cared for the animals, maintained what they could, and held on to the promise that God had given them. But waiting is never easy, especially when there are no answers, no timeline, no visible sign that anything is changing. There were moments, no doubt, when the silence felt overwhelming, when the weight of what had happened pressed in on them, when the question lingered quietly in their minds. What now? And yet, God had not forgotten them. Though unseen, though unheard in that moment, his presence remained. The same God who had warned Noah, who had guided him, who had sealed the ark, was still there. And slowly, things began to change. The waters, once rising, began to recede, almost imperceptibly at first, a shift so small it could easily be missed, but day by day the world beneath them was being restored. The ark, once drifting endlessly, would eventually come to rest. But in that long stretch of silence, before the ground appeared, before the doors would open, there was only one thing left to do: wait and trust. A new beginning. Eventually, the rain stopped. The waters began to recede, slowly revealing the earth once again. The ark came to rest on a mountain, and after waiting, Noah stepped out into a world that had been made new. The air was different. The earth was quiet. It was a fresh beginning, and Noah did something powerful. He worshipped. In response, God made a covenant with humanity. Never again would the earth be destroyed by a flood. And as a sign of this promise, God placed a rainbow in the sky, a reminder that even after judgment comes mercy. The story of Noah and the flood is more than a story of destruction. It is a story of justice, obedience, and grace. It shows us the seriousness of sin, but it also reveals something greater, that even in the darkest moments, God provides a way through. Because the same God who preserved Noah through the flood would one day provide salvation for all humanity. And the story that passed through the waters of judgment continues toward redemption.